Hello and welcome to the Right to Read celebration featuring the Toni Morrison Awards for Courage. Please welcome the host of MSNBC's The Katie Phang Show, Katie Phang.
Thank you all so much. So welcome to the 2024 Right to Read celebration. Thank you all for coming out tonight and for being reasonable, literate, book-loving Americans on the right side of this historic battle against censorship. As the voice of God told you, not literally, I am Katie Phang, the host of The Katie Phang Show on MSNBC, but more importantly, I am proud to be your host for this evening. We come together to participate in a Teach Truth Day of Action. It's to rally all of us to stand up against the wave of book banning that is sweeping across America. And yes, it is not a coincidence that we're having this event in Florida, where more than 2,672 books were banned in just the last year. So, exactly. I find it hard to believe that this is all happening in the year 2024. America has gone through periods of book banning in our dusty past, and many of our greatest authors have been banned, from Mark Twain to Virginia Woolf to F. Scott Fitzgerald to James Baldwin and the great Toni Morrison. But there are more books that are being banned today than any time in recent memory. Authors are being harassed, librarians are being fired, and teachers are being fired as well as fined. It's like we're living through something that's from another century, perhaps the 1800s, or maybe a Handmaid's Tale dystopian future. The New Republic has been defending American democracy and the First Amendment for more than a century now. Yes. The New Republic has published great and provocative writers, from Virginia Woolf to H.L. Mencken and George Orwell, whose famous cautionary tale 1984 is one of the most banned books in American history. And the irony doesn't escape us, does it? And the New Republic has also published the immortal words of Toni Morrison. So it's fitting that we are going to honor tonight some of the most modern American heroes that are fighting on the front lines against book bans with the Toni Morrison Award for Courage. So these new awards that have been created for this occasion, they're named for the woman who not only won the Nobel Prize, but also won a Pulitzer Prize, and who was a longtime champion of freedom of speech and the power of the written word, and whose name appears every year without fail on the list of some of the most banned authors in America. But before we go any further, I'm gonna ask everyone here one question and one question only. Do you love books? Do you love books? Do you love getting lost in a book and then finding yourself in a book? Do you love learning about things that you wanted to learn about and things you didn't know, and that you are learning things about yourself at the same time? Because even though there are very serious threats to our rights right now, we also wanted tonight to be a celebration of reading and our great shared love of books. So on behalf of the amazing The New Republic, I'd like to thank the people who also made tonight possible. Our great partners, the American Library Association, the AFT, Alfred Knopf and Penguin Random House, Macmillan and St. Martin's, PEN America, and our great local bookstore partner, Books and Books. And now I have the privilege of having a conversation between, but now we're gonna start before I have that privilege, of a conversation between New Republic senior editor Alex Shepard and Jodi Picoult, one of America's most celebrated banned authors today. Take a listen.
Jodi Picoult is the #1 New York Times bestselling author of more than 20 novels, including Small Great Things, 19 Minutes, and Second Glance. Her next novel, By Any Other Name, will be published in August. A number of Jodi's books, which deal with issues like abortion, school shootings, race, and LGBT rights, are also sadly relevant to this discussion. They've recently been pulled from school libraries and districts in Florida and Iowa. She has subsequently become a forceful and compelling opponent of the wave of book bans that have swept the country over the last few years. Jodi, welcome to the Right to Read Festival.
Thanks for having me.
I was wondering if we could just start by asking what your reaction was when you first heard that your books were being pulled from libraries. How did you find out about it, and what did you think about it?
I found out through Penn. Over the years, I've had books challenged at different schools, but then it was about a year ago, Martin County, Florida, banned 92 books in one fell swoop at the request of a single parent, and 20 of those 92 were mine. And when I found that out, I just sort of went, what is going on? Because this wasn't just an increase, this was exponential. And the reason that my books were banned was because apparently this parent believed that they were porn. I found that really interesting because of the 20 books, one was about the Holocaust. Many did not even have a kiss in them. What my books do have, though, as you pointed out, are topics that encourage kids to think for themselves. And I think that that very premise is terrifying to some people in this country.
You mentioned that your books have been sporadically banned or challenged before, but have you seen anything like the sort of uptick in waves of challenges that we've seen over the last half decade?
There has not been anything like this in the 30 plus years that I have been an author. Like I said, it's exponential, it is rampant, and it is amazingly also, it's really important to remember that in spite of these increasing numbers, to the point literally where I don't even keep track anymore because I gave up.
Yeah.
It's 11 people, 11 individuals in this country are responsible for more than half of the book bans, which have increased over 1,100% since 2020.
Yeah, it's incredible. And what do you think the overall effect this is having on the culture is? What do you think is driving these bans? And do you think that the goal here is to sort of choke discourse to
Yeah.
get
So, I mean, look, I'm a parent too. My kids are all grown up, but it's totally normal to want to monitor what your kids read. It is not normal to monitor what someone else's kids read and to decree what other kids should be reading. And that's really what's happening. We have parents who are deciding that they should be the arbiters of what is right and what belongs in a school library. And that's just not right. The other thing that I think is particularly upsetting is that we know that the vast majority of books that have been targeted in schools are by BIPOC authors or are stories about BIPOC people or LGBTQ people. And, what happens when you start to pull those stories and those authors off shelves is you begin to create this false narrative that only a certain type of story or a certain type of author should be telling a story. That's not right. That's not the world that we live in.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that struck me about these bands as well, is that they're not just about controversial contemporary issues like a lot of the ones that you deal with as well, but also about a question of American identity itself. And
Yeah.
the overall goal here, I think, I'm trying to find a question here, but
Yeah,
but
there
what
is
do
a
you,
question.
yeah,
What you're basically what you're saying, and what I
yeah,
agree with, is that you cannot create a revisionist history of America.
yeah.
And pulling a book off a shelf that mentions a real, sometimes painful and possibly quite wrong moment in American history does not wipe it away from the social consciousness.
And what do you think the value is too of making sure that books of all varieties and of narratives for everyone are available to young Americans?
Well, Dr. Dean Sims Bishop said it best, right? That books are mirrors and windows for kids. So we know that for kids who feel marginalized, seeing themselves or their lives or their thoughts reflected in a book really helps them feel validation. And we also know that kids who have not had exposure to different types of people or lives can explore that safely through a book. Books expose kids to mindsets they may never have heard about, and that creates compassion. So when you start taking that stuff away, what happens? You lose compassion, you lose empathy. You start to say that there's only one right way to be, one right way to think, which is not really what the First Amendment is about. Books have always bridged gaps between people. Book bans are meant to create them.
Yeah, I guess, maybe building off of that, you answered it somewhat already, but I was wondering too, I mean, I guess this is a celebration of literacy and reading, but I
Yeah.
think also of the joy of self-discovery that reading can provide as well. And I'm wondering too, this has obviously been an enormously challenging time for authors of all stripes, but if there are specific things you think people should take away, or why is this event important?
Yeah. I think that sometimes we hear these numbers and they just seem so overwhelming, especially if you're an author, that sometimes you just want to crawl under the covers and not come out. But what's really important to remember is that there is hope and there is change. We have seen states that have already passed laws to make sure that book bans don't happen in those states. We've seen other states where book bans are happening that have begun to revoke those parental rights laws that allowed for book bans to exist. And we also know that the vast majority of Americans do not want books banned in this country. The problem is there's a really small group of people with very loud voices, but there are so many more of us. We just have to be a little louder.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
All righty, can you guys hear us? Fantastic. Okay, so I am going to introduce our panelists. On my far right is Katie Blankenship, and give me 1 second, please. Katie Blankenship is the inaugural Senior Director of PEN America's new Florida office, because we need as much help as we can get down here. The new presence in Florida, for those of you that don't know, was actually funded by a group of best-selling writers who came together to fight censorship in Florida. Katie came to Penn, Florida from the ACLU of Florida, where she served as the Deputy Legal Director. So let's welcome Katie Blankenship. And then in the center, we have Fedrick Ingram, the AFT Secretary-Treasurer, and the AFT serves, get this, 1.7 million members, including pre-K through 12th grade teachers, paraprofessionals, and other school-related personnel, higher education, faculty, professional staff, federal, state, and local government employees, if you didn't know that, and nurses and other healthcare professionals. Fedrick's biography is so incredibly long that I just wanted to highlight a couple of these things, including that President Joe Biden appointed him in 2023 to the Presidential Advisory Commission on Advancing Educational Equity, Excellence, and Economic Opportunity for Black Americans. So let's welcome Fedrick Ingram. And then we also have, and I'm so proud that I'm going to be able to introduce her, Lessa Pelayo-Lozada, the immediate past president of the American Library Association and the assistant director of Glendale Library Arts and Culture in Southern California. She's a current board member of the Center for the Study of Multicultural Children's Literature, with much of her work focusing on advocacy for equity, diversity, and inclusion. It is okay to say that, DEI, in libraries, librarianship, and children's literature. So please welcome Lessa Pelayo-Lozada. I told you I was going to do that one right. So this is an incredible panel, and we wanted to use it to launch tonight's events. So Katie, I want to start with you. Let's kind of take a big picture view of what's going on. Let's talk about the number of book bans nationwide and education gag orders.
Just really light topics to kick us off. Really great news out of the gate. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. My name is Katie Blankenship, as Katie shared, and it's a real privilege to be with you tonight. This is actually one of my bucket lists, nights of not only sharing this space, but to be at PAM tonight. And this, I walk through PAM with my kid, and I'm like, one day I'll be on the stage at PAM. So y'all have made it happen, and the New Republic, so thank y'all so much. PEN America is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We're over 100 years old, and we say that we sit at the intersection of literature and human rights. We have sat very much in the space of educational censorship since its rise starting in 2021, and really in Florida hitting full speed in 2022. We've been on the front lines of tracking the actual book bans throughout the nation, along with the legislation that makes this possible.
There's litigation too, I know.
The litigation is actually where we can talk about some good news, because I agree with you, Katie, and I appreciate the way that you phrased this to begin. There's reason to be hopeful, and as Jodi told us, and the litigation is one of those. But just to put us in perspective of where we are today, Just in fall of 2023, okay, the semester of fall 2023, PEN America tracked 4,349 book bans across the country. The majority of those came from Texas and Florida, with Florida very much leading the vanguard at 40%. They were not done with the book bans. We have seen a proliferation of what we at PEN America call educational gag orders. It is a wave of legislation that is starting in many of what we're calling our blueprint states. This is Florida front and center. Florida is the blueprint of this movement of censorship and discrimination and erasure. And the vehicles that are making that possible are these censorial bills focused on our education system. So the bills that are shaping our reality right now in Florida really hit full tilt in 2022 with the passage of what we know in the media usually as the Don't Say Gay bill and Stop Woke. It continued full steam into 2023 with what's called HB 1069 in Florida. It's the expansion of Don't Say Gay and a statutory method of banning books. And SB 266, which bans all funding of any measures of DEI in any public education institution, higher ed in Florida. Immediately upon the Board of Governors passing regulations, the University of North Florida closed its Interfaith Center. It shuttered the doors of its Women's Center, and it closed its LGBTQ+ center. So those students no longer have that space to be. The University of Florida gutted a department based on diversity, equity, and inclusion principles worth millions of dollars, with all of those faculty and staff now looking at the choice of either taking some excuse of a different job in some department that's not their position or being fired. We have a teacher shortage that is at a level we've never seen before. Teachers are fleeing our state. Individuals who are attacked, which is frankly all of us, right? There are very few who are not in the favor or not in the disfavored class in Florida. And we see members of the LGBTQ community, we see our trans community fleeing this state because they are not safe here. And we are in a state of really terrifying censorship that is rooted in discriminatory intent to erase histories and viewpoints and perspectives and identities that's disfavored by many. But we do have reason for hope, and I think a lot of us will share that there's reason for hope, and one of those we're going to see tonight of the movement that is happening in Florida. And just to close, PEN America came to Florida, and I took this position in Florida because of this understanding of not only how important Florida is because it is the blueprint of extremism, but because of the strength of Floridians who are pushing back and fighting back and saying there is no way in hell we are going darkly into this dark night of censorship silently. And we are seeing people come together and work in community and coalition that is the greatest privilege of my life to sit here and be part of. And you're going to see that tonight. So I hope that you understand the gravity of what we're dealing with tonight, but also the real joyous purpose that all of us in this fight share together.
Fantastic. Thank you, Katie. And Katie's words are a perfect segue to Fedrick Ingram, because Fedrick, you know, my daughter is a rising fourth grader. We talked about this before we started. She's a public school kid. I am a public school graduate all the way through Miami-Dade County Public Schools. For the exception of a brief stint in another state, I came back for law school as well, and I've raised my family here, and I continue to do so and invest in our system. But I will say, it is a terrifying thought to continue to see what's happening to our public school system, especially here in Florida, although this is a nationwide problem, but the brain drain that is posed by kids that are not going to want to stay here to either continue to study, or families that, to Katie's point, have to flee so that there can be the freedom of the ability to just learn. Talk a little bit about what the AFT is focusing on right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that, and I appreciate that. And thank you for your kind words towards this this effort to right what's wrong out there. And I think Katie 1 or Katie 2, I don't know if Katie 1 or 2, both of you hit it right on the head in terms of where we need to be. But let me first give a shout out to all the teachers that are in our audience tonight.
Yes. Yes. Grateful.
Our teachers are the vanguards, the ambassadors of all things right. They are the educational first responders. We save lives every single day. And there are people who are taking the resources, who are taking the assistants, who are taking the books, who are taking the librarians and the libraries away from our teachers every single day. And it's all about one word. It's about power. It's about the haves and have-nots. And we can talk about it in political form. We can talk about it in a community form. We can talk about it in economic form. But Carter G. Woodson said it best. He said, if you can control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his actions. You do not have to worry about his actions. And so these folks who are trying to ban these books every single day, they know exactly what they're doing. They know that the intent is there. They know the negative oppression of not knowing your history, of not seeing another point of view, of looking at things in a different way, of seeing yourself in a book, whether you be gay, whether you be straight, whether you be male or female, black or white or Asian or Hispanic. It doesn't matter. As long as you can see yourself in that book, they know that that creates power. And so these folks are trying to take away the power from our children, from our kids. They're doing damage to our kids. They're sending a chilling effect throughout our classrooms to our teachers saying, you can't do this and you can't do that. And if you do, then we will fire you. So what are we saying to a profession that is 77% women? That they can't do their job, that they don't know what they're doing? Absolutely they do. If we took a poll in here, our public schools still work because most of you went to public schools. And so by virtue of that, we know that our public schools work. By virtue of where we are in America in May and June, this is the magic time of year for teachers because you see matriculation from one grade to another. You see high school graduations. You see pre-K going to first grade. You see sixth grade going to seventh grade. Shout out to all middle school teachers. You see all kinds of things that are happening. But what we need to focus on in our society is the word power, because these folks want to take that power away from people. This is supposed to be by, for, and about us. This is supposed to be by, for, and about people who scratch pennies every day to pay the light bill, pay the phone bill, send their kids to school, take care of an aging parent, take care of a sick kid. That's what we're trying to do. By banning books, you take that power away. You lose opportunity. You lose hope. You lose the intent of trying to get a good job, a stable job, and give back to your community. I always say our kids will take care of us one way or another. And so we need to pour into them now before we pour into them later, before they pour into us later. I will end by saying this. The AFT, while people are trying to ban books and do all of these things politically, and we're fighting them in the state capitol in Washington, D.C., we're fighting them here in Tallahassee and all over this country, we have this year given out our 10 millionth book around the country free to children, to schools, to communities. You'll hear a little bit more about that later on, but I'm so happy because you are here, because you are the ones that we've been waiting for to try and make sure that we right what's wrong out there. Our kids deserve it. There are 50 million children in our public schools who are completely intent on us getting this right. They need us to get this right, because if not, then what are we saying about democracy? What are we saying about our country? What are we saying about the 250 years that we poured into this great experiment? That some deserve it and some don't? Because of who you love, because of who you want? That's not what we're saying as a country. And so what we need to do is put our axe to the grind, as my dad used to say, pedal to the metal, all gas, no brakes, and stop these folks. And stop these folks from hurting our kids and hurting our schools and hurting our teachers. The AFT is committed to doing that every single day. We work with librarians, we work with book owners, we work with all kinds of folks who are going to make sure that our teachers are free enough to teach our kids and get this chilling effect out of our schools so that all of our kids can be the best of themselves.
Amazing. Amazing.
I have to follow that?
You have to follow that. I was going to say, and then the congregation said, that's what I wanted to say. It's all good. We love.
That's right.
We love you. Don't you worry, Lessa. So Lessa, I'm gonna start with you now with the following. And nobody rat me out to my mother, except my husband's here, so he may tell my mom just to gain some brownie points with his mother-in-law. When I was little, my mom used to take me to the public library every Saturday morning because I loved the library, and it was a safe place for me to go, and she would drop me off with a brown bag of snacks. The librarians knew me, and she'd come back a little while later after she had run some errands. But it was my library card was a spectacular thing to behold, and it was one of the best things about growing up, especially in Miami-Dade County. We have an exceptional public library system as well. And so, yes, I wanted to talk to you, though, about how the erosion of a trusted institution like a library, that if you would ever think that a library would be under attack, is stunning, and how it's not just, hey, you can't have that book available in libraries, but the librarians themselves are being doxxed. They're being harassed. They're being physically threatened just because they're librarians.
It is the scariest time, I think, ever to be a librarian, to be quite frank. Because we're dealing with book challenges, we're also dealing with increases in mental health issues in our public spaces, with drug use in our public spaces, and we're trying to maintain them as safe places for everyone, no matter your demographic, no matter your economic status. That is what we are there for. And I think that because we are there for everyone, that is why they are coming after us. Because we are trusted institutions, because we try to ensure that everyone is reflected in our collections, because there is something for them to learn, to grow, to be able to become who they want to be, if that is not who they are right now, or be who they are and enjoy that space. And so what this erosion of trusted institutions does, like librarians, like teachers, we are the knowledge holders. We are not the gatekeepers of it, but we are there to share that knowledge. And when these individuals who are, just as Jodi Picoult said, louder than the majority, because the majority are against book bans, when those loud voices come at us, that is when we are unable to actually do our jobs. Just like teachers, kind of the outpouring of librarians outside of librarianship, which is already kind of a tough profession to be in, has just continued. You know, we're coming off of the heels of COVID, where library workers, some libraries never shut their doors for a single day. Wow. And through that, continue to serve the public, continue to serve their students in schools, whether it be K through 12, preschool, or college and academic libraries. We have continued to serve our communities. And the book challenges that we've seen, because the American Library Association has top 10 banned books list since 1990, and we've been tracking our challenges since the year 2000. We don't track what's actually been banned because there's so much kind of nuance in between, so we leave that to PEN America and are very thankful for their statistics. But what we've also seen is that librarians are afraid to even report challenges, and they're afraid to report what is happening in their libraries because they don't want the attention. They don't want people to know what kind of services they're actually providing outside of the community that they are providing them. And so we have seen kind of the fear of, should I make this display? Should I make this book list? Should I even buy this book for our collection? And so the American Library Association, we are there along with the Freedom to Read Foundation, who does a lot of our litigation and legislation help, to say, yes, you can do your job, and we are there to be able to stand by you. Because if you lose your job, if you are facing financial repercussions, we also have the Merit Fund to help you, which is a fund that has been around since the 70s and has been tapped out almost every year since the year 2021, since it really started getting used. And so we have a long legacy as librarians of intellectual freedom, of being trusted institutions, and as that erodes, we just have to continue fighting back and have people, folks like you and folks out there, to be our voice when our voice is no longer trusted.
Thank you, Lessa. So on my show, I highlight a lot of the problems that America faces in different spaces. But I also try, when I have a guest on my show, to ask them to come with a solution, because that's really what we need. We can always focus on the inequities, but we need the solutions. So Katie, what can the average person do to help fight back in your particular space?
Well, this is the perfect event and the perfect group to speak about that with. We're going to see an example of exactly what happens when Floridians, when citizens are determined to save their democracy and save their public education space. These people on the front lines are literally sitting on the front row here and doing this work, as are so many folks across the state. This is our democracy. It's ours for the taking, and it's ours for its own destruction if we want to let that happen. But we are by far the majority, and let's talk about what we mean by the we. I think that's a really important discussion to have. We're not having a conversation that is so much rooted in us versus them. It's certainly not helpful to think about it as a problem of red versus blue. What is happening is we have extremists, and we need to name that what it is, and we have democracy lovers. And the democracy lovers far outweigh and always have the extremists. But we're also looking at a pattern of behavior that we're seeing very much exemplified in the South, but throughout the country, that is not new. None of this is new, right? Using our words and language of freedom and liberty and democracy against us, this is as old as time. Seeking division between people based on their race, background, sexual orientation, gender identity, this is as old as time. Because if we are divided, then the power of the people is watered down. And the one thing that those in power who want to maintain a current power structure are most terrified is our unified voice. So it is as simple and as profound as going to your school board meeting and figuring out who your local representatives are, sitting down and having conversations with them. They will speak to you. You would be amazed at how many people in the state who have power and control over what's happening you can sit down and speak to. Reach out to all of your local organizations. Every county, every community you're in, I promise you, there are people who are organized. I have the great privilege in my work of traveling and seeing them. So it is about us just coming out. This idea of this cliche that we learn as kids that we're told that, one person can make a difference. It's not a joke. It is real. And we see it over and over in this state of people leading. And we're going to recognize some of those orgs later tonight. But when PEN America says that we've been on the front lines and tracking these book bans, what we also mean is that we were lucky enough and privileged enough and smart enough, frankly, to see all of these local orgs doing the work and know that we have to support them through that. So our data that I read, that's PEN America's data that came first and foremost on the front lines from a Florida organization. They're called Florida Freedom to Read Project. We're going to recognize them tonight, right? They are mothers who decided absolutely not, and they have made an effort to create what we call public records requests. It's how you get information in the state, a wonderful tool for anybody to use. And they have literally created the data and given us the power of the information to fight back, right? That is people just deciding in their county, no more. So it's just all of us just coming out.
Same question to you, Fedrick.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much for that question. I was hoping you didn't change it because there's so many
No.
There are so many solutions out there. It starts at home. Read a book to a kid. Take your niece, take your nephew, take your grandkid, take the kid across the street. A book still makes a really good gift. It really does. Go to your local bookstore and buy a book for a kid and have them read it. That makes a difference. See, I come from the age where we had Encyclopedia Britannica, took up the whole wall.
Yes.
I'm dating myself, right?
Oh, it's great.
But what you can do is make sure that a young person has at least a class set of books at home. Make sure that if you like it, they like it. Make sure it's age appropriate. Go to a teacher and make sure that you get everything that a kid needs. Those are some of the things that you can do at home. Then outside of your home, like Katie said, go to your school board. Demand that every school have a library and a librarian. Every school. Not some schools, not the school across the street, every school. Demand from your mayor and your commissioners that we open public libraries, not close them, not shrink them, not hire in procurement, where we need sheetrock instead of books. We need to make sure that we have enough books for our kids to either check out, to go, to read, to sit, and then adopt a class. Or adopt a family in your community who might not have the money, who might not have the socioeconomic means. You can help them by, again, buying books for those kids and those families that need them. And then make sure that any kid that wants to be a teacher, support them. Support them in our schools of education because we're losing them every single day. Our kids are making a conscious decision not to go back to school because the school wasn't good to them. It's not the school, it's the system. And we've got to fix the system. Teaching is still the most noble profession in the world, and it is the most important profession in the world, and it is the reason that each and every one of us sit here. And we need to make sure that our students are well-read so that they can go to college and become teachers. So that's just a few things that we can do. I got a laundry list, but I'm looking at the time, okay? So see me afterwards.
And Lessa, bring us home and let us know how just the average person can actually help in your space.
Well, we would not be the American Library Association if we didn't have a good guide and toolkit that you can download and follow. So at uniteagainstbookbans.org, we have a list of tools that you can use no matter what is happening in your community. If you think there aren't book bans in your community, I know we're in Florida, so it's a different kind of spiel here, but from Southern California. So even if you think it's not happening, it's happening. And so make sure that you are writing letters to your library, school library, public library, academic library, to their administrations, to their city, to their county managers, letting them know that you appreciate the diversity of the collections. We have better wording than that because it's not always a great word to use, depending on the elected officials that you're talking to. But we have tailored talking points to be able to go to city council, to school board meetings, to be able to speak truth to power on how we need libraries staffed. We need certified school librarians who can do their jobs without restrictions. We are also entering political season. We have surveys for political officials to take if they want to say a badge that says, I support the freedom to read. We have those for them. We have surveys that you can ask them to find out if they really do support the freedom to read or if they are saying that for a single vote. And then for something fun that you can maybe want to do within your friend groups, we have like banned book club and things like that you can download. And then the last thing that I want to say that we have that is new are book resumes. And so there are hundreds of books, right, that are banned every year. And so librarians and library workers have gone through and created kind of a book report for each book on what awards they've won, why it's important, and in case you need those talking points to be able to go to some of those officials who are trying to take those books out of the hands of you and your families to be able to say why they are important. So uniteagainstbookbans.org.
Thank you, Lessa. And on behalf of our panel, the state of the nation, I want to thank all of you. The ability to dream is free. It really shouldn't have a cost, but we've seen that the cost is trying to stifle the dreams of not only our kids, but even us. And so I'm grateful for Katie, Fedrick, and Lessa's time to be able to share the state of the nation with you to get us started. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
My dad's name was Milton Hanna, and he was born in Greenwood, Mississippi, and came north with his mom when he was very young. And so I'm really a child of the Great Migration. And my dad is really the person who I think helped shape my love of reading. I used to read the newspaper every day with my dad. And so much of, I guess, the quest of the 1619 Project and the opening essay was me trying to understand the patriotism of this Black man who was born into apartheid Mississippi, who was a very brilliant man, but worked kind of menial labor jobs most of his life, and how he could, he served his country, was discharged from the military under kind of murky circumstances. And so much of the essay I wrote for the 1619 Project was me trying to understand why he flew an American flag in our front yard, why he felt so much love for a country that didn't really seem to love him. I was an extremely painfully nerdy child. You can ask anyone who knew me growing up. You would find me with a book in my hand at all times. I carried a book in my backpack. I carried a book in my purse. If I was riding in the car, I was reading. If we were watching football with my dad during the commercial breaks, I'd be reading. I read myself to sleep every night. I loved books. Our public library was a few blocks from my house, and I would just walk there by myself and browse the stacks and come across all sorts of different books to read. So I've always loved books. As a Black girl growing up in a small town in a rural state, books just gave me insights into this entire world that existed that I had no real connection to. But I also really struggled to find books that reflected back main characters who looked like me, who had my same experience. And I talk about often searching for a character that I could relate to, being a Black girl. And I remember kind of the first book that I saw in that way. I was looking again at the library, looking for books, and saw Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, and it had a little Black girl on the cover of the book. And then when I read the back of the book, the story it was telling was a story that I had heard about my own grandmother and our own family living in the South. So that really showed me that, wow, there are books out there that reflect me. And that was really important to me. So I was starting in the second grade in my hometown. I was part of a school busing program to desegregate the schools in my hometown. And so I went to a majority white high school where almost all of the kids were being bused in from the Black side of town. And my high school offered a 1 semester African American Studies elective course, and I took that course. And in that class, I suddenly was exposed to all of this world of knowledge that I didn't even know existed, to all of these histories about Black people in the United States and across the globe, literature by Black authors that I had never read. And I became really obsessed then with learning this history because I sort of believed, I think, as many children do, that if your teachers aren't teaching you about something, if it's not showing up in your textbooks, it's either not important or it doesn't exist. And this class showed me that actually Black people had done a lot of things, just someone had chosen not to teach that to us. So I started asking that teacher, Mr. Dial, to give me books to read on my own outside of the class. And one of the books he put in my hand was a book called Before the Mayflower by the historian and journalist Lerone Bennett. And about 30 pages in, I know that because I still have that book. I never gave it back to Mr. Dial. I guess you could call that a long-term loan. About 30 pages in is when Lerone Bennett talks about the story of the white lion that arrives in Virginia a year before the Mayflower in 1619. So I was 15 years old at that time, and that was powerful to me. I was shocked that people of African descent had been in what would become the United States before the Pilgrims, because we all learned about the Pilgrims, but none of us had learned about the White Lion. It was really powerful to me because I then understood that what we thought about as history was not everything that happened. It was what someone with power had decided to teach us about what happened. So I've really been obsessed with the year 1619, with the story of the White Lion since I was 15 years old, both because it stood in, really powerfully for this lineage that Black Americans have going back before most other people can claim outside of Indigenous people, but it also for the power of who gets to control and write the stories about America and who we are. I shouldn't have to say this, but healthy democracies don't ban books. They don't ban ideas. If we truly believe that the 1619 Project or these other works are incorrect or don't give the vision of America that certain people want to have, then in a free society, you make a different argument. You make a better argument and you try to convince people in the public square. But a society that begins to ban books, that begins to censor books, is not healthy. That's a society that's veering towards authoritarianism. And when we see these things in a place like Cuba or Saudi Arabia or China, we understand exactly what that means. I have spoken often about how public school teachers and librarians saved my life as, again, a little nerdy Black girl who wanted to dream bigger than what the world would have her believe about herself. And so I understand that if it weren't for courageous and great educators and librarians, I and so many other people across this country would not be where we are. These are difficult times, and you shouldn't have to be courageous to be a teacher, and you shouldn't have to be courageous to be a librarian, but that's what these times require. So I just hope that, as your profession has been under attack, as the freedom to read and the freedom to teach and the freedom to learn has been under attack, that you understand how valuable you are, how important you are, that the work that you do matters, and that there are people all across the country who not only need you, but have your backs. So I'm just so grateful for all of the courageous educators who have been determined to teach the truth no matter what, the librarians who have not shrunk, who have not limited what our children are able to learn about based on fear and movements that are predicated on fear. So I'm just really grateful. And I know that you all will keep doing this work because you understand how important it is for our democracy and for our society.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Renee O'Connor, and I'm a teacher. I am an immigrant, and I'm also a citizen, and I'm also a proud product of Miami-Dade Public Schools. I went to Miami, you're here! I went to Miami Norland Elementary, Miami Norland Middle School, and I'm a graduate of Miami Norland Senior High, and that's where I teach African American history with the 1619 project. So this is just full circle for me today. I can honestly tell you that in my classroom book, I have seen books actually literally save students' lives. So I have a few comments and questions for our amazing panelists. I'm so glad. This is like a teacher's dream, right? So most people want to be on stage with, you know, the basketball players or the football players. I am like shaking over here. I don't know if you guys can see, but these are my heroes. So this is really exciting for me to be on stage with you all. I'm gonna start with, I'm shaking, okay. I'm gonna start with Ellen. So my conversation with Ellen begins when I started teaching in 2011. I was a brand new teacher and I had a reading coach. This is what they do when you're new. They're like, you need help. And the reading coach was like, start them with Crank. And I was like, have you seen the size of this book? Have you guys seen how big Crank is, right? And so when I showed the kids Crank, they were like, that book is too big, miss. And so I started reading it at the end of class out loud. And by the third day, they're all leaned in. Can I have a copy? Can I have a copy? So thank you, Ellen, because that book really changed my life. It changed my students' lives. So I have a few questions for you. Your novels often employ free verse. How does this form influence your storytelling, and what do you think it adds to the narrative?
Well, it's shorter sentences. Verse is like a really intimate storytelling form, right? You know, poetry is very personal. It's like how the poet views the world. So what it does is it invites readers inside to your characters. So it's more like, instead of being told a story, it's more like you're living the story. It also adds a musicality, and you know, a lot of our young people today, believe me, I've still got a 15-year-old grandson at home, and he sings loud all the time. He loves music. And so for me, I think this idea of musicality and lyricism, it really appeals to young readers, and especially to reluctant readers or ESL learners a lot of times, because it's more digestible, I guess. As far as the storytelling, what was the second part of that? I'm sorry, I missed it.
How do you think that verse, writing in verse, adds to the narrative?
It's just, I think it's a powerful form, because I think fewer words can bring power to a page when a lot of readers can get lost in long paragraphs, or a lot of, like, I'm not a Philip Pullman fan because he's so descriptive, you know what I'm saying? I get lost in his descriptions, and I think kids can often get lost in too much description, and so verse, it's more digestible.
And the book reads so beautifully because you can read up and down, across. It's really interesting to see how kids grasp it when you put it in their hands at first, and again, it's about 3-4 inches thick. It's a big one.
pretty
But then when they open it and they start reading, and you can see the greatest joy to a teacher is when we see them in the book. And unfortunately, the books are being removed, right? So you print off these PDFs or you're reading online, but the actual turning of pages, I'm trying to tell them that's much better than reading on your phone. So thank you for that gift. A second question for Ellen. How do you see the role of storytelling evolving in addressing social issues, and what part do you hope your work plays in this evolution?
Well, I think storytelling has always been represented social issues, right? Even way back when it was all just oral, right? It was all about living. It's about life. And so I write, people always ask, like, why do you write the stuff you write? Like, why do you always write such hard subject matter? And it's because somebody has to. Somebody has to represent kids who have been through things that we don't, if you're upset with the subject matter in my books, you're supposed to be. That's the whole point of it, But you should be upset that these things happen in real life, not that someone's writing about them. So, yeah, thank you. And that's why I try to tell people, be upset, go ahead and be upset, but look at what's happening to your kids. Look at what's happening to the kids across the street. Look at what's happening. If you don't want to believe that they're going through these things, they are. And it's just important that we represent it and that we allow them to have a voice. And so what my books have been able to do for a lot of my readers, I know because I hear from them, is they're able to speak up and say something. So, to encourage them to say something sooner rather than later, and also for the kids who aren't, to understand that there's a reason why that kid looks like he does, or why that kid is acting like he does, and to develop empathy. That's a word which, these Moms for Liberty people don't like the word empathy. Tough,
Thank you. Speaking of, please give it up for Ellen. Speaking of bringing stories to the forefront, I'm going to move on to George. Congratulations, first of all, on recently celebrating your 4-year anniversary of All Boys Aren't Blue. That's 4 years. And even more importantly, he has one of the most banned books in America. So give it up for George for that. That is a great place to be. In doing research to be able to speak in front of you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, I was listening to all the books and trying to read them quickly. And so I decided to go the audio route. Even though I'm a page turner, that's what I prefer, getting the book, and I have thousands of books, is ridiculous. But I was able to listen to yours, and it was so, and you were reading, and it was so beautiful to listen. My favorite part is you can't swim in cowboy boots. That's my favorite part. If you haven't read, you have to, and listen also. But talk to us a little bit about the upcoming adaptations, because they're turning his book into something exciting, right? Talk to us about the upcoming adaptations into a television show, as well as a graphic novel that is coming out in 2026. Are there elements of the book and storytelling aspect that you will sometimes get lost, sometimes, when they put it on the screen, or is it going to be enhanced with a visual adaptation?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, we're actually doing a film, so it's not a TV show anymore.
Okay.
So originally it was optioned for television with Gabrielle Union. I'm still working with Gabrielle Union, but the writer's strike happened. It just changed the landscape of television and film, so we're going the film route now. So actually still working on it. Very excited about that. We should have some news probably after the summer about the next steps with the project. Adapting a book is hard because you have to, my book covers a lot of years. And so you do have to kind of pick and choose, well, what years do you focus on? What's flashback? How does it all, how do you make it all make sense? I think we're going the inspired by route instead of the based on route. So it will pull from a lot of elements of my life, but we'll probably fictionalize a lot because I want it modernized so that it really, really fits the current reader and the current life of Gen Z. Gen Z goes through a lot right now, and I just can't imagine making a movie that has Nextel phones. Because I had a Nextel, and so my mother used to chirp me in class. So I'm it would be funny, but also I don't know if they could relate to not having FaceTime and like the things that like, and not really having texting. Like we really didn't text a lot back in 2003 and 4 when I was in college. So it will be modernized. So I'm excited about that. In terms of the graphic novel, that's an interesting question because I'm still figuring out where to go with it. Like All Boys Are Blue is such a powerful narrative, and it's like and then I wrote We Are Not Broken, so it's like, do I have any more stories to tell? I think it's like the first question is like, I've told a lot already, and so with the graphic novel, it's like, damn, do I have anything else left to tell, or should I just be turning some of the stories that I've already told into images? Like, not 100% sure. So I'm still thinking through what I want the graphic novel of it to be and what I want it to depict. And also trying to think through if it's gonna be YA or middle grade, right? Because I could go the middle grade route and then it would just become a version of All Boys Are Blue for middle graders, which is something that I've always thought about anyway, because it's like, could a 13-year-old read All Boys Are Blue? Yes. Was it written for a 13-year-old? No. And so it's like maybe making that the version that middle graders can have and have access to. I would still have to fight the Monster Liberty, but because of the cover, like they don't read. So it's like, I'm literally fighting them because of the book cover, because they definitely don't read. And when people are like, how you know they don't read? I'm like, because I talked about Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln in chapter 5. Like, they're upset about page 268, 270, and 272, and have never made mention of what I said about Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln. And trust me, these type of people will be very upset about what I said about Thomas Jefferson and Abraham Lincoln.
It's great, though.
So I know they don't read. So this is all about the book cover. So yeah, I'm just debating on what I actually want to put in the graphic novel, and if I want to like lower some of the stories that were explicit, so that there is a middle grade version that can also help young adults as well.
So when I was listening in the car, because I've been driving around a lot, I was listening to the book. I'm like, oh, this is probably banned because of the gay elements. But then when I heard what you were talking about with Abraham Lincoln, I was like, no. It's banned because of what he said about Abraham Lincoln for sure. So it was amusing. But we're really excited about the next book because the new book is called Flamboyance, The Queer Harlem Renaissance, I Wish I'd Known. It's a series of 14 essays. How did you do research for the new project, and what storytelling techniques are you using in the new book?
Research for the project was fun because, one, I had to read like memoirs written by other people, like autobiography, like because a lot of them didn't write their own stories. Langston Hughes, of course, wrote his own memoir, but most of the figures from the Harlem Renaissance never wrote about themselves. And a lot of them, even though they were like these great creatives, at some point just left. Like they just stopped altogether. And like County Cullen, for instance, like he was this great poet, and at some point he just stopped and just became a high school teacher and ended up being James Baldwin's 10th grade English teacher. Which was so interesting to learn about, right? But like that's, a lot of them lived like during like this super great creative period, and then like when the Renaissance kind of shifted, because culture shifted, they just went into life, like normal life. So researching them was very interesting, like, and learning about them was very interesting from that standpoint, because like they were so grandiose for like this period. And then when the period was over, it was just like, okay, like Alain Locke, like he was like one of the greatest philosophers. And then, you know, Martin Luther King talks about him during the March on Washington speech, bringing up like the two greatest philosophers are W.E.B. Du Bois and Alain Locke, but nobody knew that Alain Locke was a gay black man. But Martin Luther King knew who Alain Locke was, right? So it was like so interesting learning about them from that perspective. The research was just interesting because like they were very messy. Like they were very messy. Like Lexi Hughes was very messy. Like he was extremely messy. Like he would be like a butch queen today, like me. Like how we are today. Like he would have been on Twitter, like tweeting and being messy, because he was messy back then. And it was like. It was really cool, like, learning about, like, him going to County Cullen's wedding, because County Cullen marries W.E.B. Du Bois' daughter, but everybody knew that County Cullen was gay. except W.B. Du Bois. But, which maybe he did know, but it just made such a grandiose affair. 3,000 people showed up to the wedding, and like Lacey Hughes gave them a fruit basket. And so it was just like little stuff like that I learned about the Harlem Renaissance was like great, right? And so like it's beautiful to be able to introduce this new generation of kids to that, because these should have been my heroes, right? And I learned about these people, but I didn't know they were queer. And so I was always trying to find bits and pieces of myself in heterosexual characters, and now I get to put these queer characters back into the world. And so this next generation gets to not only be like, oh wow, like I want to be like Josephine Baker, I want to be like Gladys Bentley, I want to be like County Cullen, I want to be like these people, but know that not only do I want to be like these people, but we've been here for over 100 years, and which means that we've been here since the beginning of time. And I think that's what's most important, is because they try to act like we're some new phenomenon, when realistically, we're just more public now, right? It's like, it's not that our numbers are growing, even though our numbers are growing, but we're also growing publicly. And so what used to be in the dark is now in the light. And so I feel like this is just part of my duty to shine a light on these people who existed and never got to live their lives in the light in the ways in which I get to do like right now.
Thank you. I can tell you that I think it was mentioned earlier that our young people are struggling mentally in the classroom, and as a teacher for 13 years, I've seen it. And one of the biggest disservices that this country and this state can do is by pulling books, because All Boys Aren't Blue can absolutely change some of the young people's lives in my classroom, because as a straight teacher, I can tell when students are struggling, and sometimes it's just gifting a book that you can see them come in the next day with sitting up straight, smiling. Even a smile sometimes is hard to pull from students these days, and that's what a page can do for a kid. So we need to really get this under control. So thank you for writing that book. I'm going to move on to Jacqueline, whose book I was also blessed to be able to listen in Audible, and you wrote, and you were speaking it yourself. I read an article that was published in a Colorado school district where you mentioned, and I'm going to quote you, "Who remembers their life as chapters? I remember my life in small moments." And I love this because I think that most of us can relate to this. We remember like little snippets of our life, especially when thinking about the stories that we have created about our youth. And my favorite part about your book is your relationship with your friend Maria, because I have a Maria. Her name is Adenise. She's also Puerto Rican. I met her when I was at Florida State, and we just, the same kind of connection that you had. So when I was listening, I was like, oh, Maria is my Adenise. So that was very happy. That was like really special for me. Can you share the inspiration behind The Day You Begin and how you approach writing for children while addressing complex themes of diversity and acceptance?
Yes.
Before, I don't mean to interrupt you. If you haven't seen The Day We Begin, right? It's a little picture book that they have banned, which is one of the most beautiful picture books that you can place in the hands of a young child. And I was looking through the book to try to figure out, because it's now become a science. Why is this book banned? So if you have time, you have to actually flip through the pages. What is wrong in here that they feel? So I couldn't figure it out.
Well, I think it comes back to the question of inclusion. You know, there's a brown girl on the cover. The characters that are centered are people of the global majority, and that's very scary for people, the fact that whiteness is not centered. And I think that it's not, none of my book, I mean, I've written 43 books, and many of them, you know, have been challenged to ban, and it doesn't surprise me because, as we've spoken about earlier, so much of what they're trying to erase is the history of BIPOC people and indigenous people and queer people. So I think each kindness is challenged, right? Each kindness is a book about kindness. and in terms of The Day You Begin, where it comes from is Brown Girl Dreaming, the book you talked about, that's in verse, and I have to echo Ellen in saying that I do not like adjectives. So, if someone tells me someone has a purple dress on, you better deliver why you just told me that dress was purple. Why you even told me it was a dress. Like, I think that just get me into that story and give me the urgency and give me the white space that makes me feel safe because there are not a whole lot of words on the page. And when I wrote The Day You Begin, after a poem, so Brown Girl Dreaming is a memoir about me growing up and becoming a writer, becoming 11 and then becoming a writer. And also I should say that Maria lives here in Florida. She's in Kissimmee now, and we're still very close. But in Brown Girl Dreaming, I have a poem about my great-great-grandfather who was born free in 1832 in Ohio, where the paternal side of my family the Woodson side comes from Ohio. And he was sent to Nelsonville, where my grandparents eventually lived, and we were the only black family in Nelsonville. And for decades and decades before that, he was the only brown boy. And my mother would always say to us, there's going to come a time when you're the only person like yourself in a space, and then what are you going to do? You're going to have to deal with it somehow. And think about William J. Woodson. He was okay. And when I was thinking about The Day You Begin, I was thinking about the fact that we all walk into those rooms at some point, and we all have to find a sense of belonging in that space. And that book is a celebration. And my kids always talk about how conceited I am, because I talk about how, that space should be happy it has me in it, right? And I think that's the case for everyone, right? Each of us coming into a room brings a gift to that space. And so when I was thinking about when I was thinking about William J. Woodson and what my mother said, and myself in these rooms where there's this sense that the message has historically been that you don't belong in that room, and turning that around to show the amazingness that you're bringing into that space.
Thank you. And my second question is, what's the most hilarious reaction or interesting reaction you've gotten from a child about one of your books?
It's I was thinking about that question, because thank you for sending the questions ahead of time. And I couldn't come up with anything funny, because I'm funny in real life, but when I'm living in my head, it's always it's something different going on. But I would have to say the thing that stayed with me, I was at a middle school, and a 6th grade girl, I think she was 5th or 6th grade, but she was wearing an hijab. And she came up to me, and I grew up Jehovah's Witness and Muslim, and she said to me, she asked me what kind of role my spiritual practice played in my writing. And I was just like, drop the mic and go home and let her write now, because it was just such a profound question from such a young mind, and something that she had obviously been thinking about in her own spiritual journey. So, and that was many years ago, and I still see her face with her little hijab on and the earnestness with which she asked me that question.
Oh, thank you. Jacqueline. So how often do you get to meet an author that also then opens her own bookstore? Congratulations on the recent opening of your bookstore and being one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people of the year. So I'd like to reference also first, before I have some questions, you were quoted in The Guardian.
They want the mic closer to your mouth.
Sorry?
They want the mic closer to your mouth.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Did you guys hear me saying, Okay. So we're going to do that again. Congratulations on the recent opening of your bookstore and being one of Time Magazine's 100 most influential people of the year. Thank you, George. I'm going to skip the second part. Was there a specific moment or event that prompted the decision to open your bookstore? I'm sure you've been asked. In this beautiful state of Florida. So why Florida?
Right. So I've been in Florida for 18 years now. My husband grew up in a bookstore family, and we've wanted to open a bookstore. It didn't become urgent until we were in Germany last year, And the real tsunami of book bans started happening as we were in Germany, and Germans kept sidling up to us and being like, you know what happens when this happens. Actually, there's this amazing quote. Dort wo man Buchen verbrennt man auch am Ende Menschen. So in the places where people burn books, they will one day burn people. And it's absolutely the case. It is absolutely the case that this is the beginning of the wedge of very, very severe authoritarianism. Also, I have to say, just as an aside, this is true, and it's also a distraction from other very, very severe authoritarianism that are bubbling up and are just as bad, if not worse. Yeah. People with uteruses do not have control over our own autonomy in Florida right now, right? This is happening under the cloak of a lot of the book banning stuff. So I have to say it's a distraction, and it is very, very bad at the same time. And so we have to stop it now and stop everything else now, right now. Okay, anyway, so we were in Germany, and it became like I had nothing, I couldn't do anything. I'm a writer, right? I'm an introvert, I'm really shy. So I decided, and I'm not a teacher, I'm not a librarian, I can meet these people on their own playground, which is private business, because they love private business. And I can be a lighthouse for Florida. I can have this store be a physical location for people who feel that they're not seen by the state of Florida, to know they can come there and be there, and that's a home for them, to know that we are bringing in speakers, we're bringing in all sorts of ideas. I hope that these ideas reverberate through the state of Florida, and we're giving out banned books. We're planning to be the Dolly Partons of Florida. So we have a real mission, and the mission is to fight this spate of banned books, but also just sort of shine a light and say, not only to Floridians, you are beloved. Every one of you, for every reason you're beloved. Also to the other states in the nation who just sort of want to lop Florida off the rest of the country. There are people here fighting really hard against this. So.
So she names the bookstore the Lynx, and so I was like, what? Why the Lynx? Because it's not Gainesville, it's not the Gator, and because she says, so Florida, you bite, and we're gonna bite back, right? So and the Lynx is like a very round target. Okay.
Well, there's a pun in there also. Maybe we can explain the pun. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So it's right. One of the two native wildcats, but also bookstores are the nexus between communities. We're the links right between different communities. It's so cheesy, but I love it.
So this was the second point I was going to make. So you were quoted in The Guardian in 2018 saying that, these are her words, Florida, that's another name of her book, is the best book I have ever written. Tell us why.
Oh my God. Oh, I think it was at that point. I think every book that you write, you put it in the world because you think it is the best thing you've ever written. Why else would you put it into the world? Actually, I'm going to say what Jackie would say, which is this space should be grateful that I'm in it, right? Yeah. Right? We got to be confident about our work. I do think that was the most personal book, for sure. I wrote out of my deepest soul in every one of those stories, and that book hurt a lot to come out. So maybe that's what I meant by good. I don't know. Yeah.
When I was doing research for this project as well, I went to my local library in Miami Shores. I live in Miami Shores, and I remember going up to the librarian, and you have to, now it's on the computer. When I was in school, it was like the card catalog, a long time ago. And so I'm looking, and so she's following me around. She's so intrigued. I said, I'm going to be moderating a panel of banned book authors, and she's like, and so she's making sure I'm finding all the books. And when we find all the books, she's like, what's wrong with this one? What's wrong with this one? What's wrong with this one? And she's whispering because she's scared to be talking to me about banned books. That's how crazy it is, right? So sorry. Okay, so I am being told I'm going to just swallow the whole entire mic. Okay, I shouldn't have said that. All right, we're going to move on. So each of the books here is amazing with storytelling. So my question is going to be about storytelling. How has your approach to storytelling evolved over the course of your career? So I'm going to start down at the end. storytelling.
How did what evolve?
The way you approach writing books and the way you introduce storytelling to each of your stories.
I guess for me, like, since they decided to ban my book, I was like, well, I'm gonna write even more gay shit. So, not even sure if we could curse or not, but I'm cursing. I've had a rough travel last 48 hours, so that's why I was in here late, because my luggage was lost and back in Richmond, and it was a whole day, but I'm here. Yeah, it's pushed me to write even more gay stuff. And so, like, part of, like, the birth of, like, me writing about the Harlem Renaissance was because me and my production partner, Twiggy, who's also in here, even though, there she goes, she in the back, we were talking about, like, we need to tell, like, the idea of Sankofa, which is going back in the past to tell the stories of the past, which pretty much help guide us in the future. The Harlem Renaissance was never told properly. Stonewall has never been told properly. Like, ACT UP has never been told properly. They've always been told from a very white male-centered lens, right? And I always say, like, you know, even when we think about stories like Stonewall, it's like, you know, they tell it like these white men fought the police, and I'm like, the only time white men fought the police was January 6th. Like, like, we could keep it a buck. Like, that was literally the only time in history where white men stood up to the police, and it was January 6th. It was definitely not at Stonewall. So to know that Stonewall was told wrong also lets you know that the Harlem Renaissance has been told wrong, that ACT UP, which was the HIV epidemic, was also told wrong, because there were a lot of black pioneers during that time, too, who fought so hard. And so my storytelling has evolved in the sense of making sure that I correct the narratives that have been told incorrectly, while also going back and telling stories that have never been told, and making sure that I put them out there. Because it's like, I know with All Boys Aren't Blue, like, I'm not the first person to have that story. I'm just the first person that was able to tell it. But that also means that there were stories from the slave fields of a queer person that needs to be told still too, right? And so even if it doesn't exist on the page and I have to fictionalize it, it still needs to be told. And so that's what my work becomes.
Shout out to Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah, shout out to Abraham Lincoln.
Jacqueline?
I would definitely say I got braver. I always tell people, don't read backwards, because you're going to get to the end of it and say, she really did not write well. Whereas if you go from the beginning to the end, you see that I got braver with language. I got braver with what stories I wanted to tell. And I think I got braver in the world of story, of understanding that story isn't just narrative on the page. It's the way we nurture other writers of the global community. It's the way we put ourselves out there to fight what we think is wrong in the world. You know, it's the way that we support each other as a community, that's all part of the narrative. And like what Lauren was saying about connecting the dots of violence and speaking out against that this book ban isn't just about the book ban, but it's about the war on women's bodies. It's about the war on Black folks. You know, all of this is connected. And just for me, as I got older and braver, I feel like I got more insightful, and that insight has worked inside the narrative on the page and also otherwise.
I'd say actually I've become more political. So instead of everything being so personal, I feel like it's kind of a mission. You know, at this point, I think that we need to speak up, and our characters can do that for us, you know, to a large degree. And so I think my characters are a lot braver than they used to be. And also, I've started to write middle grade, because I also see, I've got 2, and I just signed a contract for 2 more. So, yeah, so it's because these issues touch younger lives too, you know, and we also have to stand up and speak for the younger kids, like you thinking about doing as well, because the younger kids have a harder time speaking up for themselves anyway. So I think it's really important that we reach out to those readers as well. That I reach out to them too.
I'll be super fast because the red light's blinking. I've become clearer in my understanding of what it is that narrative and fiction and literature can do. And I love entertainment, but I've started to see that the difference between art and entertainment is that art upholds the status, oh, no, subverts the status quo. Entertainment upholds the status quo. And what we're doing is trying to create art, which is shaking the foundations of what people take for granted, right? And trying to undermine the things that are actually harmful through art, through questioning, right? So it's becoming clearer and clearer that that's the direction in which my work is going.
As a teacher, I want to say thank you to all of my banned book authors up here. Thank you to all the teachers in the room. This has been a special treat for me, and I appreciate all of you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.